So I wanted to do a quick video because I recently had a bit of a debate with someone on one of my friends' Facebook threads. I actually didn't know the girl, but we had quite an eye-opening discussion about, of all things, Islam. And one of the things that I've spent a lot of time in my life doing is studying apologetics, not just Christian apologetics, but the apologetics of Islam and Judaism and other different religions. And it's very startling to me that so few people know the history behind Islam, the spread of Islam, the tenets of Islam, what the Quran teaches, what the Hadith teaches. It's something that I'm really passionate about. I have a lot of friends in the UK and a lot of friends that are supporters of Tommy Robinson. I want to preface all of this by saying this has nothing to do, because Islam is not a race. Islam is a religion. Islam is an ideology. So this has nothing to do with a bigotry toward any group of people. You can make the statement that a set of ideas is really, really bad and still love a group of people. And that's the exact position that Charles Murray has taken, Ayaan Hirsi Ali has taken, a lot of academics have taken, and that's the stance that I take. I can say that Islam, most definitely, and without reservation, having read the Quran and the Hadith and studying the life of Muhammad, that Islam is the queen mother of all bad ideas. It reads like Mein Kampf. It reads like the Torah if Genghis Khan had written the Torah. And a lot of people don't know the history of Islam. So I'm going to fill you in on a little bit of that today. Muhammad was born in Mecca in the early 600s. Muhammad first received his revelations from the angel Gabriel. And after the first 12 years, and these, not ironically, this is the time in the Quran that you see the peaceful verses, the verses that talk about the people of the book. And anytime you hear the phrase people of the book, it's referencing Christians and Jews. And so for the first 12 years, the writings of the Quran are very peaceful. It was at this point, because after 12 years, Muhammad was unable to recruit anyone to Islam, apart from like his immediate family and his friends. And so what he decided to do was go to Medina, which was the Jewish hub of Arabia at the time. This is the point where you see a lot of overlap, because Muhammad thought to himself, if I can win over the Christians or the Jews, perhaps I can recruit more people. And so you start seeing a lot of overlap, a lot of similarities in the Quran and the Torah and the Bible, because he began to borrow from Judaism and Christianity. Some examples of this are that Jews pray several times a day, Muslims pray several times a day. Jews don't eat pork, Muslims don't eat pork. Just the scriptures themselves begin to sound more like the Judaic and Christian text. So when he went to Medina, the Jews rejected him. And so it was this point that Muhammad became angry and began attacking the Christians and the Jews. He called the Christians and the Jews dhimmi, which meant second-class citizens. He began attacking their caravans. He began imposing what they called the jizya, which is the protection tax. So if you were a Christian or a Jew and you wanted to live in an area that Muhammad had conquered by force, then you could either convert to Islam, or you could die, or you could pay the jizya, which was the protection tax. Muhammad was a warlord on a march, on a death march. He began to move by conquest and by the sword through the Middle East. Muhammad took the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Jesus was purported to have been buried. They desecrated that site. They tore it to the ground. When they couldn't tear anything else down, they lit it on fire. The Caliphate moved all the way into Jerusalem. They took Jerusalem, the holiest site of Christianity and Judaism. And in the year 1090, the Pope finally launched a retaliatory force called the Crusades. And this is the point that I was making to this individual with whom I was debating. Because you hear this constantly. We heard it come out of the mouth of Mr. Barry Obama, that every religion has had its conquests and its bloody wars. The Crusades were a retaliatory defense against Islamic jihad that had been spreading like wildfire throughout all of Christendom and all of the most holy sites of Christianity and Judaism. That's what the Crusades were. They were a retaliatory response. And through the Crusades, they were able to liberate Jerusalem for only 100 years until Saladin took it back. And so once again, the Muslims had the holiest site of Christianity and Judaism. Around the 1300s, the Crusaders disappeared. There was no one else left. After 300 years, they had fought against and tried to stop the death and the slaughter of Islam. So Islam spread through Central Europe, it spread through China, it spread through Spain. They changed the name from Spain to Andalusia. Finally, at the gates of Vienna, they were stopped. Islam covered more area, land, than the Roman Empire did at its very peak. That's how many lives had been lost. That's how much conquest had taken place. In 1924, the last Islamic Caliphate finally ended, with President Ataturk in Turkey, who was a secularist. He forbade the women from wearing the hijab. He forbade the men from wearing the beard. He allowed women to learn. He was a secularist, and he is still to this day very, very hated by the Islamic community, by Muslims. By the time the last caliphate ended in 1924, 270 million people had died because of Islamic jihad. And this was before we had guns. This was before we had weapons of mass destruction. These people were slaughtered, butchered by the sword. That's why this history is so important. Because when Angela Merkel made the choice in 2015 to rip the gates off of Europe and to allow anyone to come into the country, into the UK, into all the European countries with no vetting, this is a religion that does not forget. It has been less than 100 years since the end of the last caliphate. Do you think that ISIS is just a brand new idea? This is not something new. This is something from the inception of Islam that the world has faced. And I hate to look at it and I hate to see it, but at this point, the UK essentially has fallen. They're setting up Sharia law. They have Sharia courts. People like Tommy Robinson are being jailed for even attempting to question Islam, question the tenets of Islam, the teachings of Islam. If you were to go to Saint Denis, to the Basilica where Charles Martel, King of the Franks, stood against Islamic jihad, and the Royal Basilica in Saint Denis is where Charles Martel is buried, if he were to rise from the dead today, he would probably want to go back, because it is no longer France. It has been overtaken. It looks more like the bazaar at Marrakesh. And Islam is not quiet about how they conquer. It would be different if it was a religion that was spread through peace and love. This is a religion by their holy text that says submit to Islam and to Sharia law, or die, or become dhimmi and pay the jizya. It has not faced a reformation. These are still the beliefs held by those who staunchly adhere to the law of the Prophet Muhammad. I've been asked by people, what's the difference between these three religions? What makes Islam such a threat? And my answer to that is that if someone were to strictly and stringently adhere to the rules laid forth in the Bible or the Torah, the holy scriptures and tenets of Judaism and Christianity, then people would have no fear of planes being flown into buildings. The same cannot be said for Islam. Their holy text tell them to slaughter the unbeliever. They tell them that homosexuality under Sharia law, that homosexuals are to be stoned or thrown off of buildings or thrown from high places. Islam and Sharia law says that women are second-class citizens because a woman's vote is half that of a man. This is a religion that is stuck in the 6th century. And when I say that there are differences between an ideology and people, I have friends who are Muslim. These are the people that don't strictly adhere to the Hadith or to the Quran and the teachings of Muhammad. All radical Islam means is that a person is adhering strictly to the teachings of their prophet, of the person their holy text says is the model Muslim and whose life should be followed most closely. There is no other religion, mainstream religion, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, none of those, that present a very real danger to the world if adhered to in the strictest sense and by their holy text. There's one like that, and that is the religion of Islam. Read it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Go and read the Quran. Read the Hadith. Read about the life of Muhammad. And ask yourself, if someone were to adhere to the life of this man who was a pedophile, who was a slave trader, why do you think the slave trade is still so rampant in the Muslim world? Muhammad himself was a slave trader to the highest degree. Ask yourself if this adhered to strictly is a religion that you think belongs alongside or can be integrated into Western civilization. Sharia law elevates itself above the law of any land in which it is implemented. Sharia law makes itself the law of the land. And if you are in a democracy or you are existing in a Western country, the followers of Sharia law do not abide by the laws of said country. They abide by the law of Islam and Sharia. I do not think women should be stoned to death. I do not believe that homosexuality should be punishable by death. And I don't think that we should be beheading people. Call me crazy. These are the things that are taught in the holy text. by their prophet. It saddens me that people don't know their history, that less than 100 years ago, the last caliphate ended. That's one lifespan of a person, and people don't know their history. And those who haven't learned from history are doomed to repeat it. So teach yourself, become knowledgeable, educate yourself on the subject. Educate yourself and then ask yourself why what's happening in Europe, what's happening in Sweden, what happened in Cologne, what happened in London, what's happening with Tommy Robinson. Ask yourself if all of these have the same underlying commonality. And I think you'll come to the same conclusion. It's not something that I want in my country. I love people, but an ideology that is actually a political movement cloaked in religion is not something that is safe. And we need to love people. We need to love people to the truth and reveal the truth of what this religion, again, I use quotes because I don't feel that it should be called a religion. This is not a religion. This is a political movement cloaked in spirituality or cloaked in religion. And it is very dangerous. Educate yourself and educate others and show them who their prophet really was and how the religion really began. Read The Strange Death of Europe by Charles Murray. Read Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus by Nabil Qureshi. It's a beautiful book and it helps you to understand those around us, Muslims around us, who really have just fallen to a lie, who have allowed themselves to believe in a lie, or who, because it's such a cultural and political identity that's wrapped itself into every aspect of their life, they didn't have a chance and they were born into it. But the truth can set you free. And that's what the Word of God says. You will know the truth and the truth will set you free. And what is the truth? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the light. No man comes unto the Father but by me. My heart breaks for Muslims who have been lied to. My heart breaks for those people. And I wish for them what Nabil was able to find. And that's a true God who loves and doesn't punish, who saves, not because you are perfect or you perform perfectly, but because of his overwhelming grace and love for humanity. A free gift of salvation because he made you and he is God and his love is so all-consuming that he did not hold his majesty in higher regard than he did his children. He knew nothing but the voices of the angels and the majesty of heaven, and he emptied himself to wrap himself in flesh and be born of a virgin, to walk our earth and to spill blood and sweat and tears, all because he knew what would happen in the end. He knew what would happen in the end. He knew that his life had to be the payment. It had to be the payment for all of the sin. He understood that and he knew that when he did it, and he did it anyway. And you know what? If it was just you, the person watching this video, if you were the only one to have ever existed since the dawn of time, he still would have done it. That's the love of Christ. That is the one true God. He does not hate and he does not punish. He loves. And that's what we need to do. We need to love by speaking the truth and helping people to understand that this is not a religion. It is dangerous and it is full of hate. And that's all I have. I urge you to understand and to study and to educate yourself unbiasedly with an open mind. That's what I've done. And I hope that everyone does that. I love y'all, and I'll talk to you really soon. Bye.